Hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson, and I'm a registered social worker and therapist in Toronto, Ontario. I have over 13 years of experience as a social worker and 5 years as a therapist. In this video, I'm going to be covering aspects of the notion of a narcissistic mother and how that shows up within a family unit, particularly communal narcissist. They give the perception exteriorly in terms of presenting this ironclad, perfect image to the external world. In the community, they're seen as a very caring, loving mother, and it could be like they volunteer, attend church. They have the perception from what they do outside as just a very devoted mother who is self-sacrificing for their family and their kids, as well as for the community. But inside the home, they can often be cold, callous, and just generally cruel towards the children and just not emotionally available to them. And this is obviously incredibly confusing to the children of the narcissist, particularly the scapegoat in the family, as there's often with the communal narcissist a great deal of attention placed on the children in the sense that they're instrumentalized. So they are to reflect the mother's perfect image of themselves and of the family, and they must submit to this perfect image and this narrative of the family. And so this is what leads to the term malignant normalcy. The family aims for this ideal of presenting in a perfect, harmonious way, but in reality, they're not like that on the surface, when they're together in person. So they're presenting the image that they have this perfect harmony, when in reality, it's nothing of that sort. In terms of the narcissistic mother, they present this image as though they're perfect. For the narcissistic mother, I'm thinking, so I had a client who their mother was narcissistic and most likely a communal narcissist. And so this client of mine, their mother basically had this like perfect image in the community, was very much well respected and had credentials. And yet her experience of her mother was very much anything but that. And as she became a mother of her own, she was recognizing and understanding that although she probably could have taken that to some degree growing up, she didn't want to expose that for her child. And her mother, because usually with narcissistic mothers, they don't respect boundaries because for them, they don't really have boundaries. You're just an extension of them. And so they instrumentalize the children. So as mentioned, they put a lot of attention on making sure that their child reflects them in this kind of perfect image. And so the children find that the only way they usually get attention is if they're achieving something or making the mother look good. So having real anxiety or the daily struggles of the child in the family growing up, that is often ignored, and that messiness is pushed away and not something that the narcissistic mother typically was empathetic or emotionally available for. But then in the community, and when it comes to the way in which that child reflects them, they very much put a lot of attention often on those aspects of the child. This is very confusing for the child. Growing up, they learn that basically their parents objectified them, and they're only good as their accomplishment or how they reflect towards or for the family or for the mother. And then maybe they get into relationships and that same self-sacrificing can come out in the terms that they believe that they have to please others and perform basically. But this is because growing up they're very much conditioned in this way from very early on, that the only way they get love, so this notion in these families of kind of pseudo-love, so it's what they associate with love is actually not love, but the mother getting narcissistic supply from the kids. Also, these children, adult children, grow up and they believe that they must please others because for them growing up, they very much had to be on the lookout very hypervigilantly for what their mother would want or needs. And so for these families, it's very much not only that the mother needs you to get on board with the agenda and the narrative of this perfect image of the family, but they also need to convince you that this is actually normal and what is should be expected and associates it with love. For mothers who are covert and communal narcissists, everything ultimately comes back to them and how it reflects on them. So let's say that you have a new partner and that partner reflects well on the family, then you would perhaps get more praise from the mother. But this isn't because they're happy necessarily for you, but rather it's how it reflects on them. And so these are just experiences that you grew up in and you come to know as what you probably consider normal from a young age. But then if you're the scapegoat, it's likely the case that you start speaking up on these things. So for the narcissistic mother, there needs to be forced harmony. So on the outside, everything's just a performance. You are to align with the sense that the family is harmonious. And this is why, like, for the scapegoat, it can be very confusing, because let's say that earlier in the day you have a big blow up with your family. You're perhaps feeling attacked in an argument with your sibling or mother. They are very much cruel towards you, or have perhaps narcissistic injury, which leads to narcissistic rage towards you. And then you're pretty much all out of sorts and emotionally dysregulated. Later in the afternoon, you're at an event and siblings pretend that everything's normal or blame you for the scapegoat. There's forced harmony. The family is to be harmonious regardless of mistreatment of the scapegoat or any siblings. This can be confusing because you know what happened and your experience was true, yet there's gaslighting from the family, the narcissistic mother, and you might gaslight yourself. There's a part of you that wants to maintain and wants to be a part of the family, might suppress this and gaslight yourself and say maybe it was my fault, but anyway, you have a tendency to explain it and rationalize it. But this is because the family pretty much forces you to do that. In dysfunctional families, there's more externalizers. These families are emotionally fused, and then they externalize onto the scapegoat. And the scapegoat is often more of an internalizer. So that's to take Lindsay Gibson's work. And so they can be very much self-reflective and very sensitive children. And they just have a tendency to look in themselves and see what could I have done differently or better. Whereas with an externalizer, there's a sense that if someone changes, or if this person changes or this situation changes, then everything would be fine. And there's typically little to no self-reflection within this dynamic in terms of how they are responsible. And yeah, I'm just explaining how the notion of the communal narcissist, so the mother that projects this perfect image, and that the children are taught very young to have to go along with this. This can be confusing because at some level, perhaps you've come convinced that this is your mother and this is the way she is. There's a notion as we grow up, we have an idolized image of our parents. When we become teenagers, we'll start to rebel more because we understand that parents are just adults and not perfect. The child is going to be more rebellious, asserting themselves. That's a normal part of maturity. But then there's the idolized image within a shared fantasy. We were convinced from a young age that this ideal image is our mother, so this communal narcissist is our mother. So the image that the family projects, as well as the exterior world projects in terms of, let's say a person has a good reputation in the community, or goes to church, has a successful career. So all these things convince the scapegoat that how could the family, community, society all be wrong and I be right. It takes a lot of courage, strength, intellectually, and knowing from your own heart the sense that what is true. Because the communal narcissist, everything's a theater on the outside, but really in the inside they're shallow and lack empathy towards the children. It's no longer taking the act as reality. When the scapegoat starts to pick this up and call it out, the communal narcissist parent will become very much, there'll be a storm, because they probably know that you're on to them or that you recognize the truth. To them, this is a threat obviously to the equilibrium of the family and to that perfect image that they hold. And so they might they might do things to appease you. There's a notion of the narcissistic abuse cycle. So if let's say you're on the discard phase or the devaluation phase, and there's a notion of hoovering, parent is looking for a way to re-engage you or for you to re-engage them. And so they'll maybe make a text or find some way to get you roped in again. This is tricky because it's your mother and want a genuine, authentic relationship, but because they lack authenticity and actual mutuality, pseudo-mutuality, you're stuck in this damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're in a bind. Do you subjugate and expose yourself to continue exposure to your mother who's narcissistic and abusive towards you, or go no contact? Or is there a medium where you limit contact and live on your own terms, show up authentically, and ask yourself what kind of relationship you want versus what your family wants from you? And this can be even despite the way they act towards you. So it's tricky figuring out what kind of family and what kind of son or daughter do I want to be. But that's just coming first from yourself, from this calm aspect of yourself, and being differentiated. If someone's truly toxic, I would encourage you to consider going no contact. That's after your own contemplations and considerations. But once you start calling out the narcissistic mother, who's the communal narcissist, they've honed that image for so many years and are so desperate to ensure that maintains itself because it's obviously their false self. And so from a young age, because of their crippling insecurities, they need to project this perfect image. If you question that, even acknowledging small faults is a threat, because if there's any weakness to the false self, then the whole kind of house of cards can come down. And so perhaps though, like within the hoovering phase or the love bombing phase, they'll future fake, so they'll give you the perception that they're going to make change, or they might make some accordance to what you've said to them. But typically this is couched in the sense that it's still like something that you're doing or that you're being difficult. But maybe they'll go to counseling or therapy with you, but then won't take responsibility. And so perhaps that's just their way of continuing to rope you back into narcissistic supply. But yeah, typically once you're onto them and you've seen behind the facade, they find you no longer a form of narcissistic supply or a reliable one. But at the same time, narcissistic people, they're still okay with negative narcissistic supplies as long as they're getting attention. They're okay to be the enemy. Often you have the flying monkeys, the family, the golden child coming at you, giving you the perception that how could you think that your mother's this way? Surely she's not that bad. The siblings or kids, like your brother and sister, can't accept that their whole life is built on a lie. It's a threat, right? It's like you're questioning their whole family and existence, right, in some sense. But all done within just understanding the truth is and trying to understand what a healthy family is. But for them, it's that pseudo normalcy. So what they think is normal is actually unhealthy and dysfunctional. When you start being yourself and speaking the truth and looking for some accountability, this typically will threaten the equilibrium of the family. And because the narcissistic mother has this perfect ideal image in the community, they've sacrificed themselves to that pursuit. It's likely they're not going to change their ways. That's why it can be incredibly difficult, particularly because in society, with regards to mothers, often there's a way in which we idolize, we value mothers and just the importance that they have in child development and children, raising children. And I think that's the way it should be, but there's a sense also that within that, obviously there are unhealthy, you can consider toxic femininity that does occur. With a communal narcissist, everything's surface level, very superficial. It's just the way you present to the world and like your persona. And then there's this notion of forced harmony. So you are to kind of align with the family as though it's this perfect image. And if you don't reflect the perfect image, you become a threat. Typically, you're the scapegoat in that circumstances. and you'll have perhaps a smear campaign in a way in which they will see you as the negative one. But this is all kind of very subtle too, because even though you might be the scapegoat, all it takes is for you to go along with the script again, make bygones be bygones, forget your family or the past, and things would be fine. Become again part of the collective ego mass of the family, the undifferentiated ego mass. But that's no way to live. What you have to do in these situations, especially obviously becoming more aware, is the notion from Bowen is to differentiate, to emotionally regulate, so being less reactive within the family unit, differentiating the sense of becoming yourself and setting boundaries. And in terms of boundaries, it's enforcing the boundaries. So I would say not even really, you don't even have to say them necessarily. It's fine to, I guess, say it to a narcissist, but typically a narcissist doesn't respect your boundaries or doesn't even hear them. It's better just to enforce. Let's say you're on a call and you've told your mom several times you don't like to be called names or something, or to be put down. And then you say, I'm going to have to get off the phone if that happens. And so that occurs, and then you go off the phone and maybe you limit your contact for a week or so. And that's the way that you maintain your boundaries. But yeah, through healthy differentiation, building your authentic self and aligning yourself with that, doing your best to emotionally regulate when you're interacting with the family. You're not playing out of that role self or being reactionary in the sense that you're getting out of sorts with your anxiety. And sometimes that just means limiting contact. And I was also speaking to a client yesterday about the notion of having a protective aura. So when you're with your parents, let's say in this case your communal narcissistic mother, then let's just say that for the most part she's talking about herself, or she's praising her kids in front of others, and you know it's phony. You have this protective aura connected to your body, so you're not getting disembodied, just becoming aware of your energy. There's a notion of energy vampires, so a lot of my clients will report that after they got off the phone with their mother, they very much feel emotionally drained, or they very much don't look forward to interacting with the family, but feel guilty because they obviously want to have some form of relationship. By protecting your energy with an energy aura, making sure that you're connected with your body while you're engaging with family, goes a long way to just ensuring that, yeah, you're staying more emotionally regulated and attuned to yourself. In this video, I covered aspects of a communal narcissistic mother and how they project this perfect image, and that you're to go along with this image. And if you don't, how this can really cause issues and challenges if you're the scapegoat, and how this narcissistic mother can typically lead very subtly and covertly to smear campaigns against you and just basically distort things in their favor, perhaps even playing victim. And yeah, just how that's incredibly hard. I spoke about some strategies and tools in terms of the notion of healthy differentiation, as well as energy aura, setting boundaries in terms of following through on consequences or actions. And then also just the notion of connecting with your authentic self and being aligned with what you want to happen versus being reactionary. Thanks and have a great day.